Hey there. In today's video, I am showing you how I use plaster gauze, or it's also called plaster cloth, in different art projects. Well, I'm not showing you the end result. I'm just kind of showing you how it's initially used. I will drop in a photo of the art that I made that is currently showing at the art walk at a coffee shop. And I don't have it right here to show you, but there's a lot of really cool things that you can do with it. And I would suggest that once you kind of see what it is and what it can do, that you just run wild with it, because it can go over the top of anything. I'm showing you some things that I did with it and maybe some ideas that maybe a firmer substrate is a better option than. I tried it on a art journal, on cardstock, just very thin cardboard. All of those are fine. But again, you kind of have to think about what you want to do with them or not. I mean, for me, it's just like, does it work on this? And then how can I take it? Can I use a piece of it? Can I glue it onto something? I like to just make things and then see what happens. So if that's you, then you might be interested in using this plaster gauze. Now, I will say, I want to preface this with, I am no expert on this. I don't even really know how I even found out about it or started using it. And I had a big stash of it that I have not used in many years. And I saw an artist use it, and then I was like, I got to use that stuff again. And then when I was preparing for this art show walk, it's an art walk where people, anyway, I just went for it, and I put it all over these plywood boards and just on a myriad of other things, most of which the wood blocks are the things that I used the most. But I think if you like the look of plaster and you like having the convenience of having it in strips, then this might be something that you enjoy. So anyway, without further ado, let's get started. To get started, obviously you need the plaster wrap or cloth. In this case, I dug through, I have a kind of a bin of this stuff, and I did find something that had some packaging on it. I honestly, years ago, I bought a ton of it, and it's been sitting around, and I haven't used it in a while, and so I don't know if this brand is even still available. I will put a link below, but it can be generic. This was just in a generic plastic bag. I must have bought a bunch of generic plaster gauze. I call it plaster gauze. They're calling it rigid wrap plaster cloth. It doesn't really matter what you call it, but this is kind of how it looks. It comes in rolls. It has little holes in it, and then the plaster is attached to it and is activated when you put it in water. So these are the rolls it comes in. This is the only size that I know. Possibly there's other versions, but this is probably the most common. So you need, obviously, to do this project, you would need to purchase at least one roll of the plaster gauze. Then you need something to put to get the plaster gauze wet. So I like using this old tin pan just because it's long and I can just get in there. A lot of people I've seen use just a jar or something like that you can dip it in. And so whatever, but this is kind of, I really kind of like just being able to lay it out flat. You also need some scissors to cut these into pieces and strips. And then, of course, you need your substrates. I'm just going to show you the substrates that I used just as an example. And so once I move all this away, I will bring those out. But, they could be thin. This is like, I don't know if it's balsa wood or what it is, but it's very thin wood. I've used it on, this is like cardstock, pieces of cardstock that I haven't, that I've torn off of cards probably that I messed up on. Thin pieces of cardboard. And then I've also done it on like plywood pieces. So, and actually, I just now remembered, I also did a page in my art journal, and it's been drying overnight. So I'll be curious if that was a mistake or not, because it might make it too thick and crunchy, but we'll see. I mean, again, I would try this on anything, because I think the fun of trying something new is experimenting, and it doesn't really matter how it turns out, because you're just kind of playing around and seeing what happens. So anyway, I'm going to clear this away, and then I'm going to bring out the pieces that I did yesterday that I've dried overnight, and then I'm going to show you how I actually apply this. It's really not that complicated, but I'll just kind of show you the whole thing. All right, I'm just going to show you the various substrates that I used yesterday, and let me actually grab the so you can see what it is. So, for example, I guess I will move these over here so that you can actually see what I'm doing. I'm going to use this black background. So, here are these that I did. So, I put the gauze and cut the gauze into strips, and then just wrapped it around. I did not do the back. These seem sturdy. They seem like this would be fine. I don't know. You could do a variety of, you can use them in your art, or you could create little 4x4 pieces. I think these are probably 4x4 or maybe 3x3. Okay, so then I also put it on the cardstock. Now, this feels a little bendable. And again, I think the substrate, because it has water in it, it makes it bend. So my hunch is I could cut this. I could, with heavy duty glue, I could probably glue this in or onto a piece of art or another substrate to make something. I just wanted to give it a try. I was like, hey, let's see this. I like all the texture. I like the different marks it made. And I had never done this before. So I just thought, I'm just gonna show you guys what it looks like. This is bendable. I mean, in terms of the paper is bending. It may crack a little. I can feel a little bit of cracking there. So I don't know about the longevity of it, but it was a fun and inexpensive way. If you're just wanting to practice with it, highly recommend just get some cardstock and put it on that way. Then these are very thin cardboard, and on neither of these did I do the back. I just did the one side. So again, it feels, because this cardboard is so thin, I think thicker cardboard would react differently, and I probably should have done that to show you. This feels thin enough that it's almost like a cardstock, so it's bendable a little bit. But again, it's an inexpensive substrate, and definitely I would try cardboard. And if you're using a cardboard box, that would probably be really sturdy, and I probably should have done that for the sake of example. Then, of course, this is the larger 10 by 10 piece of plywood, and I love it. I just did one side. I did a bunch of art for my art, the art walk show that I did, and I will show those. I don't have those on hand because they're still hanging, but I will try to drop a picture in so you can see what those look like. I did a lot of stuff. I put ephemera over the top. I ended up doing encaustic over the top. There's just a lot of fun ways that you can finish these off and create your own individual pieces of art. So, okay, I'm gonna set these over here, and let's open up this art journal page. Okay, so there's the other side. Feels okay. I guess because both sides had something. And this is heavy duty. This is, I left the thing in here. This is the Arteza, well, it's a sketchbook, but it's 118 pound, which isn't as heavy as you'd think. But I actually have really enjoyed this sketchbook. I don't know why that's sticking, but I like the pages. They take the paint really well. It's not as heavy. The 118 pound, you'd think it wouldn't be as durable, but I really love this art journal, and I will probably get another one. So again, I think to close it, you can see it may not want to close, but this comes with a strap, and I might weight it down with some books to see what I can do. So, maybe not the smartest thing to do. So maybe don't start in your art journal. Again, I'm willing to try anything once and see what happens. And, you just don't know. So anyway, I was glad to try to let you guys see how this actually worked and what I did. So the next step, what I want to show you is how I actually apply it to a substrate. And I will probably just I'll probably do it on this one, because this is most typical what I would put it on. And then this probably mirrors like a thick piece of cardboard, better as well. You don't have to do it on wood. Obviously, there's, like I said, I did it on all kinds of pieces of substrates here, so you'd be willing to try. I will say the firmer pieces are this really thin balsa wood. I don't know what this is. And to me, that is the sturdiest. These have some flexibility because the substrate is a little thinner, but like I said, I think the stiffer or the thicker cardboard would probably work just fine. So I'm going to show you how to apply it, or how I apply it. And again, I'm no expert here. I just know what I like doing, and So I want to show you because I think you guys would have fun giving it a try too. So, okay, I'm going to clear this off and we'll come back in a minute. First off, I want to say this is messy. And by messy, I don't mean paint messy. I mean, it's powdery. So this comes off when I start cutting and it just leaves a powdery residue everywhere, which is the plaster. The other thing I want to say is when you get your plaster wet and there's little granules at the bottom, this is not water that should be poured down the drain because it is plaster. So it will set, it could congeal or I don't know what it could do, but I would pour it outside on some rocks or something like that. Because even though there's only going to be a little bit in here, you do not want that going down your drain. So the first thing I do is I just cut a bunch of pieces. Now, I think it's interesting because this in particular has a ridged edge and not all of them do. I kind of like it. It just kind of adds some interest. So I might cut, let's just cut, you know, like 3 this size, kind of squares. And let's cut some strips. I am not super particular or want things to be a certain way. So if you are particular, then you could obviously have this more measured out or something. So I might do something like this. I might also do a long one and maybe cut some strips this way. Okay. And here's the other thing, when you start laying them out, if you don't want, let me grab one over here. Let me grab this real quick. If you don't want these edges, the texture, you could flatten this out better in terms of putting very large strips over the top like this. Then you're only going to end up with maybe a few edges. You could do it either way. Nobody said you have to wrap it around. I like to wrap it around the edges, but you wouldn't necessarily have to. But you could end up, and if you smoothed it out and sanded it, it could be really smooth. It would just have a plaster texture. It wouldn't be crazy texture like this. Like I purposely added in more texture because that's what I like. I'm a big texture fan. So I'm going to do one more long one, and I may have to cut some more once we get going. I never really know. Let's see, do I want to, maybe I'll cut it in half. I guess I didn't need to cut them long if I was going to do this. Let's just cut some smaller squares. Because again, I do like, you can see, that's just from cutting it. So, okay, and we can always cut some more depending on what happens. I am going to start, I think, with the bigger ones because I would like, maybe I'll cut a few more big ones, these bigger ones. I do like these to wrap around the edges. So, but again, so I just take the piece. There are 2 different sides. I have found that this side is smoother. This side appears to be the side that has the plaster more textured on it. I put them on both ways. I do not pay any attention to if I'm putting it down this way or this way. I have found no difference. So you experiment and do you, whatever you find works the best for you. But I just find that the plaster it merges with all of it, with these little holes and everything that are in there. So I haven't had any problem with it. But again, I am no expert. I am not a professional plaster gauze person, but I just kind of mess around. So I kind of pull it around to the back and smooth it out as I go. You can see this. And if I need more water, I can dip my finger in. And it can be as smooth or as bumpy as you want. If you don't like those little holes in there, you just smooth those right out. I've found that there's always some, and it doesn't bother me. And if, like I said, you wouldn't have to go around the edge if you don't want to. Okay, and again, I think I might just do the edges with these, just to kind of get those done. And I will say it doesn't set super fast, but it isn't something that you can, as you can see, this one I didn't put down as well as the other one. And it doesn't lend itself to being taken up and down and on and off and all of that, because once you get it wet, it wants you to put it down and set. Now, okay, I don't know if you see this string right here. I'm gonna leave the string because I like it. I'm gonna leave all these edges because I like that as well. Okay, so like I said, a lot of times I will do this differently, but for the sake of showing demo, just getting all those little pockets out, messing it. So it's like they're like little pockets that will take the plaster, and they will. Some of them will. You can still see when you're done, and that probably means they didn't get wet. Maybe they didn't get wet enough or something. But okay. And again, I don't normally work like this in terms of covering the corners, but I think for the sake of example, this is probably a good way to do it. I'm pretty random in terms of even doing these corners and things like that. But the corners, I will say, are a little bit trickier, particularly if you want to go around the edge. So these bigger pieces are helpful that way. And as you can see, it's not super messy, but that powdery stuff gets everywhere. The powdery stuff, which is plaster. Okay, so let's say I want to use, and I guess I should push those further away, but let's just start adding some of these other. I do like to do the edges and the sides first for whatever reason, which I guess is just a weird part of mine. And I'd like them to stagger. I don't want them to all be the same. So I might do one like that, and then maybe let's do a thin one. I'd like a lot of overlapping. So, and then this one, whoops. So that there's a lot of texture. But you could, like I said, just do some really big pieces, cover the whole thing, and it would be fine. It would be super cool, probably. I think it's more about the plastery feel to it than it is anything else. Okay, so you kind of see how I'm doing it. I'm just gonna do the rest. I think I'll do the rest in fast forward. There's nothing really to say about it for the most part. You can just watch me putting on different strips and covering this whole board. All right, everything is covered on this, all the edges, all the way around, and it's very wet. Now, obviously I have some extra pieces, which I wasn't anticipating because normally I don't cut as many as I need. But what I was gonna do, this one I think got a little wet, so let's use it, was I have a lot of texture going on. But if you have some leftover pieces and you're like, oh, I just wanna throw those on, you could stick them on as they are, or you could cut them into smaller pieces and stick them on places where, let's say, there's not as much texture. So that's often what I do, although, like I said, typically I don't have a lot of extra leftover pieces because I tend to cut not as many as I need, but obviously when I'm showing you guys, I'm thinking ahead a little bit more. So it's kind of fun just to have these little extra, in my opinion, texture pieces, and they just go right on the same way. And obviously you could layer as much or as little as you want, and you could just use these random pieces also just for another project. There's no necessary reason to use them for this, but I just wanted to show you that sometimes that's what I do. I use up all the pieces, so then I don't just have random pieces sitting around. Okay, so this would then be set aside to dry, and I typically leave them overnight. It doesn't take that long for them to dry, but again, I don't plan to mess with them in one day. Now, I will say on some of this, you can see there are the little holes. If you want to go through and kind of rub out those, that will help. I think you always will end up with some because it's the nature of the gauze that it just shows those little, holes. But you can, mitigate that a little bit by adding some more water over the top. You can also, and I'll show you in a minute, you can smooth out any of those spots later or the next day after it dries with some sandpaper. And I'm going to show you that as soon as I clean this up. I didn't fully clean up because I wanted to show you how I sand. So this is the dried one that I did yesterday. The other one I just did is drying off on the side. So this is an old piece of sandpaper, but you'll get the gist of it. So you can feel along the top, it's pretty rough when you're finished. And that's true for even these little ones. There's roughness to it, and that's perfectly fine. But sometimes you might want to just make it a little less rough. And so I run some sandpaper over the top and just kind of smooth it out a little bit. Now this also creates a lot of dust, as you can imagine. So it still leaves all the texture, and then, but it's just not quite as aggressive. So you can do that as much or as little as you want. So I'm going to finish doing that. I'm going to sand this and then show you what I do next. Now that my board is sanded and all the plaster gauze, there's a lot of little pieces of thread sticking out, which I don't mind, but if you did, you could go through and clip those. It's fairly smooth. It still has a lot of texture. So the plaster is very absorbent though. So typically I don't go right in with like a glaze or something over the top of this until I have put a layer of gesso over it. So that's the next step that I'm going to do, is I'm going to put white gesso over the entire thing, and I'm just going to put it straight on here and let that dry. So then after that, which I'm not going to show in this example, and I can, hopefully I'll drop in some photos so you can see what different things you can do, what I have done recently. But typically I would you could glaze it, you could put collage pieces, which is what I did, different ephemera over the top. You could just paint it. It would be really cool just as a piece of textured art. So yeah, it's just a fun thing to explore. And I guess I just wanted to encourage you to give it a try if it's something you've never done before, because it is pretty unique. And it's a fun way to use plaster without getting out the plaster of Paris, and it gives you automatically this kind of cool patchwork. It can be a patchwork if that's what you're going for, which typically is what I'm going for, texture right out of the gate. So anyway, that's all I do to prep. And from there, I typically do like a raw umber glaze, cover it, and then kind of see what it looks like at that point, and then go from there in terms of continuing to make it into a piece of art, or sometimes if it's on a thinner or a smaller piece, this would be its own piece of art in and of itself. But something smaller, I might put on a card, or I might put as part of an assemblage in terms of putting it on it. Like this could be, this smaller piece could be adhered to a larger piece like this. Not necessarily both of them with this kind of textural background, but this could be the centerpiece for a larger piece, or one small part of a larger piece, or something like that. So there's just a myriad of ways that you can use this plaster gauze, and I just wanted to show you some ideas for ways that I get started. Not necessarily the end product, at least not in this video, but hopefully down the road I can show you some things that I do with this. and where it leads me. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.